this is Axe and Smash, here with Great North Wrestling. We're going to talk about our careers, some of the things we did.
Good things, bad things?
Not everything.
Thank God it's not everything.
And we want you fans to enjoy it.
And we want to thank all the fans too. Thank you.
So I just wanted to start by asking you what it was like going to high school with Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, Tom Zink, and Nikita Koloff.
Boy, it's funny you ask that because out of all the interviews I've ever done, nobody's ever asked that question. Being from Robbinsdale, all of us guys are very proud of the city where we're from. And I grew up 3 blocks away from Rick Rude, so I knew Rick Rude since we were little kids. And Kurt, I met probably, must have been when I was in 7th, 8th grade. And Tom Zink, baseball when we were little kids. But the greatest guys in the world. I mean, it's like you have your friends and you got your best friends and then you have other friends. Well, these guys were friends for life. And that's what it was like growing up with them. They would have did anything for you. I would have did anything for them.
And just to fast forward quickly, how did you end up getting into pro wrestling? Is it something you always wanted to do, or was it something you did with your gang of friends?
Well, we used to work at a bar called Grandma B's in northeast Minneapolis in Minnesota. And it was myself, Rick Rude, both the Road Warriors, and then there was a few other guys after that. We all worked at that bar. And one of the bartenders there was Eddie Sharkey. And we were all powerlifting and training and in good shape and everything. And we used to throw guys out the front door of the bar. And one night after hours, we were sitting around, Eddie Sharkey says, you guys ought to get into wrestling. And growing up, I used to go see Larry the Axe Hennig and the Crusher and the Bruiser, and I loved wrestling. And we all told Eddie, we said, well, yeah, get us in. We were just joking, we thought that, what can he do? Well, next thing you know, about 2 weeks later, we're beating each other up at the camp in an old boxing ring, and Eddie Sharkey trained us in. That's how we all got started.
Out of all that gang that you worked at Grandma B's with, who would you say was the toughest?
Out of us 4?
The bouncers that turned into wrestlers.
Probably Rick Rude was probably the toughest out of our bunch. And because he wasn't scared of nothing. It was, all of us other guys, we might have been tougher, I don't know. But, I wasn't a fighter, Animal wasn't a fighter, but, if somebody wanted to fight you, you fought.
Right.
But Rick was a different kind of a guy. He was almost like a pit bull, The nicest guy, I mean, he would do anything for you. But boy, you crossed him, he'd be the first one to throw the punch, and he'd do everything he could to win, Just, he was just one of those guys. And there's always one of those guys that's your friend that just, is the pit bull of the group,
Is it true that there was once an incident backstage with him in the Ultimate Warrior where he kind of snapped off on the Ultimate Warrior?
He did it with a couple of different people. Rick's a very honorable guy. In wrestling, he'd take care of you, expect you to take care of him, and he wanted to have the best match of the night. And that's kind of how all of us guys from Robbinsdale were. It was, you wanted to steal the show. And if something wasn't your way, you'd get upset about it. And I don't know what the whole story was, but it's probably one of those incidences where the Warrior probably nailed him a few times in the ring. And, Rick wanted to have the good match, so he didn't take it out on him in the ring, and then he came back in the dressing room and, set him straight. He did that with a few people too.
And one of your first territories was Georgia Championship Wrestling. Just wondering if you could briefly share your memories of that and the controversial Ole Anderson that not too many people seem to have gotten along with.
Well, what's funny you say Ole. I was really good friends with Ole. Ole was really good to me, and I can't say anything bad. In fact, when all of us were trained in with Eddie Sharkey, Eddie called up Ole Anderson and told Ole, he says, Ole, you got to get down there and see these guys. Because at that time I was about 320, good-looking guy with hair, and in good shape, power lifter. And Animal was the same, and Hawk, and Rick Rude. So Ole used to come down there and see us training, and the first guys that got into wrestling was Animal. He ended up, Ole got him into North Carolina. And then Rick Rude came up here to Canada, and I went to Hawaii. But Ole always kind of looked after us four guys, and that's after I was with Florida Championship Wrestling. Ole took me in up in Atlanta, and then he sent me to Bill Watts. So Ole had a mind for, who was going to be good, how to train guys and everything. So Ole was a great guy, and the reason why a lot of people didn't get along with him is because Ole was set in his ways. If he didn't like you or your look or whatever, you'd be down here. So he, being the booker of a big wrestling organization like that, when you're on, TBS, and he had a lot of heat with a lot of the guys, because he didn't just, put guys on TV. It was the guys that he thought could become, wrestlers.
And you mentioned Bill Watts. He had a legendary territory, Mid-South Wrestling, that you were a part of. What's your memories of working for him and working in that territory?
I'll tell you, when I went to Atlanta the first time, that's when the Road Warriors were there, and they were just starting to get over. And the first night I was there, I didn't know how to wrestle. I couldn't work a lick. I was terrible. But I could get along. The first night I was there, I was partners with Stan Hansen, and we were at the Omni. And I was Man Mountain Darso, and I carried an axe with me. And we were wrestling the Road Warriors, and it's a sellout crowd in the Omni, and the people are nuts in Atlanta. And I remember Stan Hansen saying, Barry, don't bring that axe around me, just put it in the corner and you follow my lead. Well, I didn't know what was going on. Stan Hansen went in there and threw that bell around. Road Warriors took off. That was the end of the match, and I thought, holy cow, I got a payday for this? And I'm thinking, this is the greatest territory. Well, Ole ended up sending me to Bill Watts to learn how to work. So when I went to Bill Watts, he took me in. I went down to the ring with George Weinkrauf and Art Cruz just about every day. They got me on the mats. They trained me different ways, and really got me going. Then I wrestled Terry Taylor, the Junkyard Dog, Jim Duggan, the Rock and Roll Express. And it was just a great territory for learning. And you worked every night, double shot Saturdays, double shot Sundays, and if you didn't work right, Bill Watts would kick you in the ass, and that's the kind of guy I needed a guy like that to really teach. And Ernie Ladd was down there, Grizzly Smith. It was just the best territory to learn. When I left there, now I could say, hey, I was a pro wrestler. After 2 years in the business, wrestling everywhere with all these guys, I didn't learn until I went to Mid-South. Now I was comfortable going anywhere and wrestling anybody. So that's Bill Watts, that was his territory.
And you were a Russian there, teaming a lot with Nikolai Volkov. What are your memories of him?
Well, when I was there, I was a babyface. I was Crusher Darso, and I was terrible. Started kind of coming into my own, and Bill Watts said to me, he says, Barry, the only way you're going to really make it here is you got to become a heel. And he says, we're going to make you a Russian turncoat. And back at that time, everybody in America hated Russians. So he says, you're going to be partners with Nikolai Volkov, going to take this shovel, and you're going to bury all the Americans. And I just went, holy cow. And a couple years in the business, I'm thinking, God, this is pretty serious stuff here, And it ended up working. I ended up being a heel, and that's why I worked with Terry Taylor, who was phenomenal in the ring. He taught me so much. Then, Jim Duggan, and, it just ended up, that made my career being with Nikolai Volkov, because I learned a lot with Nikolai. And from there on, that's when my whole career started going uphill.
And I was surprised to learn that you actually were teaming with Jim Neidhart for a while in Florida Championship Wrestling. What was that like?
Well, and then, back then it was all the territories everywhere, so it was my turn to leave. So Bill Watts, sent me down to, Florida Championship Wrestling, where Mike Graham was the booker, and his dad was there, and that was my next step of really learning how to be a wrestler. And so I went there as Crusher Khrushchev, and then I teamed up with Jim Neidhart, and he ended up becoming my turncoat with me. So we were both turncoat Russians, so we had some serious heat down there. And then Dutch Mantel came in, and we kind of popped that territory again. It was just everything that we did, the guys, the promoters and the bookers that I was with really taught me so much and made my career, each territory you go up, you kind of moved up the ladder, you know.
Did you work with Dusty Rhodes at all in that territory?
Not in that territory. He was in Charlotte. And Flair used to come in to Florida all the time, and you know, I knew Rick because he was from Minneapolis. And Dusty wanted me to come up to Charlotte at the time, so Rick was a big influence in me getting me up there. And that's when Ivan and Nikita were there. And they needed me up there because Nikita was just starting, so they wanted me to help with Nikita and be partners with Ivan. So that's when I moved up. And then that's why I worked with Dusty a few times there.
So I guess I'll start by asking Bill, the Demolition originally started with Randy Coley, yeah. How did the whole Demolition characters come about? Was that a WWE idea? And what
Well, it was a combination. Vince, of course, was looking for a team similar to LOD or Road Warriors. And he had approached Randy first with the idea. And I was going back and forth to Japan, so I really wasn't thinking about being in there all the time. So Randy had approached me and asked if I'd be interested. And I said, yeah, it sounds interesting. And we came up with the idea from the Mel Gibson movies and took a little bit of this, a little bit of that. He had some ideas with the different types of boots. So after about 6 or 7 weeks, we had come up with the images and then approached Vince. And then we had our first match in the Meadowlands. And it didn't go, the matches went well, but the Mystique didn't do very well because I had been in there as a mass superstar, so they had no recognition factor. But Randy had been in there as one of the Moondogs, and they're champions for a number of years. Very, potent team. And everybody, as soon as he came through the curtain, recognized him. So we got back at the Meadowlands, and then we did the next night at Allentown. The same thing happened. So I simply told Randy, I said that I don't think this is going to work. I can always go back as a mass superstar, and you can find another guy. I knew the character and the image was good, but it wasn't going to work in that combination. And then Vince had approached me, and we had some conversations, and he made some suggestions. I said, they're all good guys, but it's the same thing's going to happen. They were people who were in the WWF at that time and had a good run, good workers, but if they recognized Randy, they were going to recognize them. And then I met with Barry, and they had already approached him about coming up. So I think we met in Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
And I had known about Barry from Ivan, and we hit it off right away, and that's how it started.
And what was your memories of coming to WWE with this gimmick, Barry?
Well, I just ended up getting screwed on a payoff by Jimmy Crockett. So I had a falling out there, and I hated to leave Ivan and Nikita because it was a great run. Those two guys were fantastic, and the territory was great. But I ended up leaving there, and when I left, I got a call from Vince McMahon. David Hebner told Vince that I was no longer there. So when Vince called me up, he says, hey, I got something for you, you want to come up and work. So he ended up flying me up there, and I was all fired up because, now we're going to the big leagues here. This, Charlotte and all that territory was big in the South, but the WWE was worldwide. I mean, this was the deal. So Vince didn't tell me anything what was going on until when I got up there. He made me sign a contract stating that I couldn't tell anybody anything, and then he showed me the pages of what the Demolition would look like, and then he mentioned that Bill would be my partner, and he said, what do you think? And I said, well, as soon as I heard it was Bill, I said, I'm on board, let's do it. And I told him, I said, but I got to have a couple months off. I said, I've just been going nuts for years here, and I need to train, and I need to get my head right. So he signed me to a contract right then. I had a couple months off, and then we did our first TV together, and we talked in the meantime.
Yeah, I was back and forth to Japan anyway. Okay. I had made a commitment to go, and of course he didn't want me to go, but I told him, I said, I like to keep my word, and if I told you I was coming in at a certain time, So during his time off, I was back and forth to Japan as, Mass Superstar.
And I guess your first feud was against Ken Patera and Billy Jack Haynes. That was your first major. Yeah.
They all run together.
Was that our first one?
I don't know. I remember those early matches, yeah.
What do you think of what's happened to Billy Jack in recent years? He's kind of gone off the deep end, apparently.
Yeah, Bill's a friend of ours. I think he's been through a lot of trials and tribulations, and he had some demons of his own. So, we haven't been in contact with him since.
He was just a good guy, though.
And did you guys know Ken Patera prior to WWE?
Yeah, I did. I knew him in
Yeah, I met him before too.
What exactly happened, if you don't mind me telling? There's all sorts of folklore, but when he ended up going to jail for a couple of years.
Well, I think they were out drinking, he and Saito. I don't know the particulars, but they went to a McDonald's that was just recently closed and got agitated because they couldn't get, it was after hours. It was like, even if it's 2 minutes, they're closed. So someone threw a brick or
A stone about this big, I think.
yeah, through the window, and then they went back to the hotel. Of course, small town, everybody knew who they were, and they got arrested for it. And I guess they had assault charges against police officers or something.
Yeah, something. I don't know what the whole story was.
All right. And we've done interviews with the Rougeau brothers, and I know you guys had some matches with them, so I'm just wondering if you could give us your opinions on those matches and what it was like working with them.
Well, they're both friends of ours. I don't think we had the chemistry, and as well as anybody, there has to be give and take in the matches. It can't be take or me first. For a good match, it's got to be equal. All four guys and the referee have to be involved in it. And they're, not that they aren't good workers, just the chemistry wasn't there. I don't remember coming back to the dressing room saying, wow, that was a good one,
And were you guys around during that whole thing between them and the Bulldogs?
We were in the building at the time, but I think was it Florida?
No, we were in, I think it was San Francisco, California, I think.
Somewhere, big cow palace or whatever.
And there's a million people at TV, so you hear
you're
things.
Eating and you're doing, we heard about it. Now, what took place before, don't know. I mean, the Bulldogs were kind of jokesters and pranksters, and maybe a prank went overboard, I don't know.
So I guess the dressing rooms in those days were a little different than they are in the WWE now.
Well, the dressing rooms then were separated. There was babyface dressing rooms. There was a communal area where you would have cafeteria, but you didn't mix and match. I mean, you were in separate parts of the building.
Right.
And at one time, I mean, if you were schmoozing with your babyface opponent, you can get fired. That's changed now, I guess. So.
And you started off being managed by Johnny Valiant, and then you were switched to being managed by Mr. Fuji.
We requested that.
Oh, you requested that?
Johnny was a good manager, but he's sort of out of left field. He's like, he didn't match the character. You got these two nemesis coming out and kicking butt and taking names, and he'd say something off the wall.
Yeah, we were more serious and wanted to be more serious heels, and he would, be more jokingly and everything. And that wasn't us. We wanted to go out there and just kick some ass,
And a lot of times it would negate what we did in the match. He wasn't there very long with us, maybe less than a week. And we both knew that Fuji, if there was going to be a sinister manager who was going to get you some heat, it was Fuji. And fortunately, Vince supported us and said, "You're right." And I think he gave Valiant another team. And then we took Fuji, and then they saw Fuji and Demolition. That's a good
Then
match.
they knew we were real heels.
Yeah.
And he was known as a practical joker, I guess. Did he ever dare play any tricks on you over the years?
No, he was good to us, and thank God he was with us, because that's probably why nobody ribbed us, because we were with Fuji.
Yeah.
Because the ribs would have been probably 20 times worse that Fuji would have gave out.
And he was for the team. Fuji would, he was an excellent worker. I don't know if many people remember that, and a former champion themselves. But he would critique the matches after the evening. Didn't matter where we were going, from Montreal to Ottawa, whatever. All the way he's critiquing, and not criticizing, but helping you.
So he was a shoot manager too.
And he would tell you, you need to do this or tweak that or change this or eliminate that. And then once the match started, everything was focused on us. Rather than some managers, when the match starts, they're ranting and raving and walking around, and everything's focused on the manager, not the talent.
Right. And you guys had numerous matches with the Hart Foundation. What are your memories of those? I know you already mentioned to us that you were former partners with Jim Neidhart, so
Right.
I guess you already knew him a bit.
Oh yeah. Well, I thought we had great matches with those guys, and that was a good chemistry. Brett could really, he was more of the worker, and he could fly around and do all that, and Jim was kind of the stronger guy. So you could get the sympathy on Brett, and Jim was big enough and strong enough and mean enough.
Yeah.
He could throw us around and bump us and everything, and the people would, really believe it. And back then, it was a lot of big guys, and I always thought that you had to make the people really believe that we were badasses, and I think we did that. So when somebody would make a comeback on us, it had to be a good comeback to make us bump, and that's when the people would come up. So it was really good chemistry with us.
Yeah, and they were like we were. We often tell them during interviews and things, we wanted to be the best match on the card. And in order to do that, you have to have good opponents. If they're not willing to do the same thing, then you're not going to make any money. And we produced 150% every night, because at the end of the match, you're going to get the rest.
Right.
But you want to bring the people who are there that night bought the ticket. You want to bring them back, and you want to bring more people with them. So if they're not willing to produce and put out, then we just make a suggestion. We'll work with them, but it's not working. And we didn't have to do that very often.
Yeah, and I truly believed that every one of the tag teams back then, which were unbelievable, they all wanted to work with us, because we did work 100% every night, and it wasn't about the demolition, it was about the match. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how we worked together, and it was the best partner I've ever had in my life, because it didn't matter if he was getting beat or I got beat, it was the team. And that's what I think really made Demolition.
Yeah.
And I just have to ask you guys your opinion on that Montreal Screwjob incident with Brett. A lot of our friends
I don't know that much about it. And originally when it first happened, I didn't doubt it happened. But as the years pass and the things that have transpired with the getting back, I know how I would have felt if that happened to me, and Barry too. But it's like, it may have been a work.
See, I thought it was a work right from the beginning, and I don't know if it was or not, but it's wrestling.
Yeah.
And to bring Brett back, how many times, and make him millions and all that, you just don't do that, unless it's work. And I don't know.
And see, now you have a reduced second volume of Flair and his daughter and Brett, right? And Natalie, and they're calling that the new Montreal Screwjob. So, was it in their back pocket all this time?
And I tell you what, I love Brett, and he's one
one
hell of a worker, and so is Sean, and so is Vince.
Yeah.
There's three of the best workers in the business, and they could have pushed this all the way to the end.
Yeah.
And really made it look.
Hey, more power to
Hey,
them.
when you can fool the boys, then it's the best angle ever,
Yeah.
and they fooled a lot of people.
I think a lot of it was believable because guys like Brett.
Yeah.
And they sort of felt pissed off. So that added to the fuel.
And Sean's getting the big push, and he's a hell of a worker. Vince has got to be one of the best workers in the business, right?
Yeah.
So it could have been a work.
And one of your more memorable feuds was with the Powers of Pain. Do you want to just get into that?
Very good guys, good friends of ours. And they sort of get left out in the cold, Barbarian's probably one of the legitimate tough guys in this business. But everything he does in the ring looks like it's killing you, but it doesn't. And
He's a real pro.
You look at the Warlord. Oh my God! At that time, what a physical specimen. Still looks great.
Yeah, it's like knocking on a brick wall.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
and he'd get anxious sometimes, and you'd end up being hurt, but he didn't mean it.
the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah.
Nice.
We had good matches with those guys, good chemistry, and it could have gotten longer. We could have made more money, but we didn't make those decisions.
And I guess Andre the Giant's last real feud in WWE was when he was teaming with Haku against you guys. And
Yeah.
of course, you had a big match at WrestleMania 6.
Yeah, Andre was a real good family friend of ours and godfather to my daughters. And I had a long-standing relationship with Andre years ago when I was working in Charlotte and Georgia and back and forth to Japan. He was my partner, my opponent, my partner, and he got along well with Barry. And if you piss off Andre, there's not much you can do about it. But he liked us and he really worked hard. And then there's Haku. Haku's tougher than Barbarian. And everything Haku did looked good. It's just sad that a lot of our friends died real young.
And do you have any drinking stories about Andre that you've witnessed?
Well, what I was telling somebody yesterday, I think we were at a restaurant, which was legitimate. The Japanese newspaper had come over and they were following Andre when he was one of the owners here at Montreal. We sat in Dunn's restaurant. I think it's St. Catherine Street there.
Yeah.
And they were telling him, how much do you drink, this and that? And he did it just to prove to him. He had 101 beers and a sandwich. And he just ate the sandwich just to prove that he would eat something. 101 beers at one sitting.
Wow.
Tell him the story about going down the stairs in Japan. With the stairs was about this wide and it was about 2 stories down.
Yeah, it was a German restaurant that we used to go to. It was one of his favorite spots. And Murdoch and I and Andre would go there probably twice every tour.
I went to that restaurant and then they told me the story. Me and
it's
Andre
like
were there.
Like you're
and then they
going
told me
down
the
a
story.
closet two stores down. And of course he was a little tipsy after drinking Jägermeister and big German drafts. And he said, boss, I might need some help going up the steps. So Murdoch and Murdoch, for some reason, every night thought he was going to outdrink Andre, which is impossible. So we're literally pushing Andre. I'm looking for help. We're pushing him up these flights of steps, all the same time thinking, my God, if he falls back on us, he's going to kill us. And we go up there and they're little Japanese cabs. They're little small Toyotas and Hondas and stuff. So he had to hide behind a pillar at the front of the door, and we'd wave down a flag, and then he'd run in, and he'd stick his head in, and his butt was sticking out the one end. And the cab driver, no.
With the white gloves
Yeah.
on.
And you mentioned Barbarian being tough. Haku is also known as a very tough guy.
If you want to be in a fight someplace in a bar, you want to make sure that both those guys are
On your side.
Yeah.
Were you there for that incident that took place with Terry Funk's, or Dory Funk's partner that was brought in to replace Terry Funk? What was his name, Jesse Barr or something? Where Haku apparently, he made some comment about Haku. And
Boy, I never heard about that one. I knew Jesse Barr too.
I vaguely remember
But I don't know
hearing
why
about it, but was it Haku or Barbarian that bit the guy's nose off?
I think it was Haku.
Yeah.
I tell you, I could never figure it out. You look at Haku, and people would pick a fight with him. And I mean, if you walked in a room with 100 people and you saw Haku, that'd be the one guy you wouldn't want to.
Well, the guy,
and he is the greatest, nicest guy out of anybody. But man, if you
Yeah.
pissed him off, holy cow!
they were drinking at a bar. We weren't there. We were on the tour, but we weren't there. And they went to this one bar, redneck bar or something, and somebody made a racial comment about him. And he of course, took offense to it. And they challenged him, and he wiped them up, bit the guy's nose off.
Did the shellfish incident with you, Bill, happen before or after Crush, the idea of Crush?
Before. You know, I had gone back and forth to Japan 42 times, anywhere from 2 weeks to 8 weeks over my career, and consumed a lot of sushi and shellfish and shrimp and crab, and I was explained to it by the doctor. There's a toxic buildup. There's so much iodine that has a shelf life in your system, and after a while, it gets to build up where it's a level, and one more piece of shrimp put me over the edge. I had an anaphylactic reaction, and now I'm allergic to bee stings, and spider bites, and shellfish. But that happened before, and it's funny. I think it was before WrestleMania or something, wasn't it? Or right after?
I think it was right after.
Right after. And in my thinking, I had passed out had a shrimp dinner. We're going to go see a movie, Red October, which I haven't seen yet, because I equated with the reaction.
Right.
So I passed out in the lobby of the theater, and I left my body. And I'm going up. It's peaceful, quiet, and I look around, but I'm not really moving. But in when my body, I left it, and I'm looking around. My wife's holding my head, crying. They're calling for the 911. And it seems like it's forever, but my wife says probably 90 seconds to a little bit longer, but not long. And I hear off in the distance, there's no blood pressure. There's no pulse. I can't find blood pressure. He has no pulse. I'm thinking, what are they talking about? I have high blood pressure, I take medicine, so it's not me. So I turn around and I go right back into my body. And I felt like I was moving, but my wife said I didn't move. And I looked over in this state, and they had me hooked up to a machine, and 2 lines are flat. So I'm thinking, and it probably was right after WrestleMania, because I said, well, I better call Vince. I'm not going to make WrestleMania. And at that time, I said, well, I got insurance, the house is paid for, cars are paid for, the girls and my wife would be paid for. And then I looked over, and one guy said, I got a pulse, faint. The other one says, I got a blood pressure, but it's 25/15. And I thought, this guy's dead. It was me, but I'm thinking, it's not me. And then I looked over again, and those 2 lines were still flat. And all of a sudden went beep, beep. And he says, this guy's back. So they rushed me into the ambulance had come by that time. They put me on a gurney, and I remembered Billy Graham Superstar, the angle that they used to do all the time.
Fall off.
So they pick him up, and they're putting him on a gurney, and they're going to put him into the ambulance. But I'm thinking, they're going to drop me. It's part of an angle. So all these weird things are going through my mind. But yeah, that was after. And then I was in a hospital for about a week.
Just one further question about your out-of-body experience. When you were sucked back in, did it feel like a dream? Like, you know, those times when you're like...
Well, you remember those things you used to look through, kaleidoscopes?
Yes.
And you turn it to the light, and it'd be all kind of stars and different designs and pretty colors. And I heard the sound. Went right back in. I didn't realize that I had left my body because I thought I was there all the time. But I was moving. I saw twinkling stars, lights, nothing scary. And then I made the turn around and came right back down. So
did that incident make you more comfortable that something happens after death? Your spirit?
Yeah, it made me, because you know what, here's not following up on it, it did. It made it, the only thing I had a little anxiety about is there was things I hadn't done. I keep telling Barry I've got a bucket list, things I want to do before I die. But I'm not afraid of dying. I don't want to die. I want to watch my grandsons and my family and all this. But if I do, I'm not afraid to die. It made me appreciate things that I had that we were working for, that I didn't appreciate because I was too busy working. You know, you're so busy, you're chopping the woods in the forest, you don't realize you got a beautiful home, you got a fantastic wife and family, but we took that for granted. And yeah, it did make me appreciate it a lot better. Then I was in the hospital for a week, went through all these weird tests, and was at Emory University, which is a teaching hospital. And the guy that developed the technique to go into your thigh, goes up into your heart, and he said, "Now, Bill," he says, "I'm going to shock you. You're going to die 4 times." Goes in one chamber, bzz, and they have you already zapped up. You have to sign your life away that you're not going to sue them. They prepped you with a movie the night before. If you die, you can't come back at us. You're willing to do this. And you just feel a little flutter, and it goes in that flutter. He said, "You're okay." He said, "I killed you 4 times. And you take it out." So he said, "They're going to try a bunch of medicines." He said, "We'll try. The last thing would be a pacemaker." And he said, "I don't know if you want to wrestle with a pacemaker." But he said, "What you have is a short circuit. Your synapse, the electrical charge is not going straight, it's arcing." So he gave me a medicine. Half hour later, boom. He said, "You're okay."
Oh, wow.
So then I went back to Boston. These guys were working in Boston. I'm sitting on a plane. Older gentleman sitting beside me, and I'm reading this book because the doctor says, "I want you to get this book, Life After Life." I said, "Well, okay." I went to the bookstore and went to Barnes & Noble and bought Life After Life. It's written by Elizabeth Eady. Same as my last name. Same spelling. It talks about all these instances of out-of-body experiences. Some are peaceful, some scary. People she would interview. So I'm reading the book, and I closed the book up as we land. The guy said, "How was that book?" I said, "It's pretty good." I said, "It's about," he said, "I know, it's my wife wrote that book." How about those situations?
Wait, and
And she was there in Boston making a presentation, but we were working.
But what's funny is I don't know any of this is going on. You know, we had our probably 5 days off or something at that time. So, you know, we're on the road for months and days, and you know, when we go home, we don't call each other because you know, it's family time. So I don't even know any of this is going on. Then about 4 or 5 days later, Bill calls me up and he says, "Yeah, Barry," he says, "I had an allergic reaction to shrimp," you know, and I'm thinking, "Oh, you know, didn't sound like too big of a deal." You know, he goes, "Yeah, I was in the hospital, it was no big deal." So I don't even know any of this is going on at the time. He doesn't tell anybody. And then the next thing I know, we get on the road, and then I find out how serious it is. You know, and then I can't even remember exactly what happened when Crush came in or whatever it was, but
Well, they were replacing me with like Neidhart,
yeah.
Demolition, and they had, you know, the tickets were already sold.
Right.
So rather than give Barry some time off, they brought somebody else in and made them a Demolition. I don't think they understood how serious it was either.
Yeah.
I didn't. So,
Well, yeah, you didn't even really
No.
realize how serious it was.
you know,
Till you think
you're
about
invincible when you're.
And I guess one of the feuds you guys had when there was 3 of you was with the Rockers, where you had some matches with them. Do you have any memories of wrestling those guys?
it. The Rockers were a great team
Yeah.
to wrestle. And, you know, I can't exactly remember what we did or when it was, but, you know, we had some really good matches with those guys.
Yeah, they had lots of fire, of course. You know, you got Jannetty and Michaels. I mean, how could you have bad
2
matches?
incredible workers.
I don't think that they were going to push that because of the size difference, but it was exciting for the times that we had. I mean, they sold like hell.
And when they made a comeback,
Yeah.
you know, you could bump for these guys because
Yeah.
they were legitimate guys. I mean,
You're coming off,
and the people would lose their minds, you know.
yeah, they're coming off top turnbuckle with drop kicks and off the ropes.
Oh, they were good. Fun to work with.
Were you surprised that Sean went on to become such a star?
You know, I wasn't because he was
No.
he was such a good worker. You know,
It's sort of like Brett. Brett was a good worker as a tag and a good worker as a single. You know?
and it was right at the change when a lot of the bigger guys were starting to move out, and they needed more excitement in those main event matches like that. And Sean brought that. I mean, he could do everything. So he could wrestle a big guy and make it look right. And I mean, it was just exciting matches.
And you had some 6-man tags with the Ultimate Warrior. What was he like to work with?
Well, it was the Ultimate Warrior and the Road Warriors.
Oh, they were against you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was another one of those things where you just have matches that kind of clash a little
Yeah.
bit. It was tough. It's not those nights where you want to go in there and say, "Hey, I can't wait to wrestle the Ultimate Warrior and the Road Warriors." You know, like the Rockers. All right, we got the Rockers tonight. With those guys, it was like, "Ooh, we got
Yeah,
to think about this one." You know,
and especially,
and they're all great guys. You know,
especially
it's just-
Jim. He just wasn't polished enough.
he did his thing,
He did his
and
thing,
you had to work around him.
but it was
You
limited.
know, yeah.
You couldn't have. I don't think we could have had a long feud with him because it just wasn't. It wasn't workable.
Why do you think you never had more of a feud with the Road Warriors? I know you'd had a lot of house show matches against them.
There again, I think the chemistry. You know, it's very important that you have to have a give and take. You can't. And they were both good friends. We still see Joe a lot.
And you
Still good friends, but the characters, one team, you got to be working for the match, not the individual team.
And you know what? I think if we would have never met with those guys in the ring at all for a year or 2 years, and they could have, you know, been either the baby faces or heels, and we were the baby faces or heels, and we went our own way. Then I think if you could have established each other in the WWE, then I think the chemistry would have been there, because then either we would have been the
Yeah.
heels or they would have been the heels.
Yeah.
And the way it was, we were both kind of heels, baby faces, and you know how hard it is to work like that.
Yes.
If you have one team that's over as a heel and one as a baby face, it's easy. And I think if we would have did that, it would have been the hottest angle ever then.
Well, it's
You
the
know?
same thing that, remember when they brought Flair in,
Right.
and everybody said, Flair and Hogan, wow.
Greatest of all time.
Well, it just didn't go wow. It
Shouldn't have
just-
put them together. Should have kept them apart.
And like Barry said, if it would have been over a period of time where the people are clamoring for it, they'd accept it.
And do an angle out of it
Yeah.
instead of just putting two teams together. And
But
it's
The, the matches were just matches. There weren't, oh wow, that's great, you know.
yeah. And Joe and Mike, they were pros. They were good enough. We could have tore it down if it was just the right deal. You know.
And what led to Bill ultimately getting released?
Well, I had been approached with a different position, and once Crush was there, and the closer we got to the time where I was going to switch to an office position, the terms were changed and changed and changed. So rather than beg for a job, I knew I could go back to Japan, just go to the closet, pull out the other gimmick, and go to Japan. And that's what I decided to do.
Was there a legal situation that took place out of that? I think the Honky Tonk Man was mentioning something to me.
No,
once.
not out of that. No, that was a different.
It was something different.
Yeah.
That was after.
Yeah, I just decided that what I was offered at first was promising. And then when I was offered the second, third, fourth, by the time we were ready to move to the position, it was just like a part-time position, so I didn't feel I wanted to do it.
I'll just finish off Barry's post-demolition questions here. What was your feelings on Bill being released and continuing on with Crush and that whole situation?
You know, it was really a strange. The whole thing was strange because the Demolition, we had a long time to go, and it wasn't working out very good with Crush either. And then at that time, we were gonna. They put masks on us, and they were trying to do everything they can to kill us off. And you know, then they offered me a job as the repo man. In fact, I quit, and you were quitting at that time, and Crush was still there. Then they called me back, and I didn't even want to go back. And then I became the repo man out of it, and that was kind of it was a whole different situation. Yeah, it was everybody kind of went their own ways and everything at that time.
Did you find it insulting at WrestleMania 7 when they basically brought in the two Japanese guys that hardly any American fans knew at that time because there wasn't an internet or anything, and they put those two over you guys on at WrestleMania 7? And
No, I didn't, because we ended up going to Japan. And we
there
worked
was a
with
rematch.
We worked with them over there. So, it didn't, That was in LA, wasn't it, I think?
Yes, that was it. That was a big one.
Yeah.
And before you became Repo Man, I read that you actually were in WWC Puerto Rico for a few shots.
Yeah, me and Crush went there to Puerto Rico. That was the time I was telling you when they threw all the guys were throwing all the rocks and Dino Bravo was there. Oh, it was bad. Yeah.
Were any of you guys friends with Bruiser Brody before that incident happened with him?
I knew Brody for a period of time. I wouldn't say I was friends with him, but I knew him through Stan Hansen, and Frank would come in and out of Georgia. So we had been in locker rooms, but I wouldn't say he was a good friend like Barry and I.
Yeah, and I met him through John Nord, and they were partners in the AWA. So, and I didn't know him real well, but nice guy.
What did you think of that whole situation that basically he was left there for?
I thought it was the shits.
Yeah, that's the worst thing ever. How could you do that to somebody?
And I still don't understand how the guy can be boastful about killing somebody and not in jail. Only there would it happen.
Would you say you were treated fairly by the Puerto Rico office? Did they honor their word?
Oh yeah, they were really good to us. They brought us in there, and it was excellent.
And back to the Repo Man, you started to talk about it. Did they come up with that character for you, or did you have some say in the design of that character?
I did a little bit. It was Vince and I were talking about it and came up with it. And it was supposed to end up being a gimmick where, it was going to be a big-time babyface gimmick. And then, because I wanted to do a lot of stuff for Make-A-Wish, go to hospitals and see kids and do all that stuff. But it never got to that point where I could turn babyface. And that was why I quit. Because that was the promise, to be the big heel and have all the kids scared of you and hate you and you're the worst guy ever, and then all of a sudden, you're the good guy.
Make-A-Wish doesn't seem to do that now.
Yeah, but and it never turned out that way, and then that's why I put my notice in and I quit then.
Was there any particular reason why it seemed that you constantly wrestled Crush when you were Repo Man?
I don't know. It was.
That's the only major matches I could really recall.
Yeah, we were at Wembley Stadium together too. It just. Yeah.
Ottawa too. You came here.
But I mean, I wrestled, Savage. I wrestled Duggan. I wrestled Kurt Hennig. I wrestled all the top guys.
What were the matches with Savage like?
Oh, they're great. I loved working with them. Yeah. In fact, what was the building right by Madison Square Gardens? What was that one? That was
Manhattan Center.
Manhattan Center. Yeah, we did an angle where I stole his hat and stamped on it, and we had a match there where I came in a tow truck and wrestled. Yeah, it was good.
And what led to you going to WCW as a Blacktop Bully after that? Just the empty promises of turning babyface?
Yeah, that was, I put my notice in. So then I was out of work for a while, and Arn Anderson, great friend of mine, and my wife's from Charlotte, so we went down to Charlotte, and Ric Flair was the booker in WCW at the time, and he says, Barry, I want to bring you in. And so Bobby Eaton, Arn, and myself were sitting in the garage one day, in Bobby Eaton's garage, having a few beers. And Rick says, I want you to be a truck driver. Think of a really good name. So we were sitting around, and Arn puts his glasses down. We're drinking a beer, and he looks at me, and he goes, you're the Blacktop Bully. I looked at him, I said, that's the greatest name I've ever had in my life. And I love the gimmick. It was great. We went to Rick, and Rick says, that's it, let's do it. And we started the angle with Dustin Rhodes and Ricky Steamboat, and I mean, and it could have went a long ways, but they ixnayed it, and I guess I wasn't the guy, but.
It was popular, I recall that. And what was the issue exactly? You had that unique match that took place inside of a moving truck.
Well, it was the big uncensored match, and Mike Grimm came up with the match. He says, hey, We're going to have a match in a flatbed truck with a cage around it. You're going to go on a 50-mile trip, and it's going to be the most brutal match, and you're going to win because it's your match, and that's going to be the match you're going to have every year. Well, they had the uncensored matches at an arena, so it was a live show, and then they cut away to our match. Well, somebody was saying, I don't know how true this was, but there was a few matches going on at the arena, and ours was, they went cut back and forth. Pretty soon they were booing the matches in there. They wanted to see our match. So I think it got a little bit of heat, but we were told to have quite the match where we were bleeding in the match, and make it the real, and it was the real deal. I mean, we were hitting the cages and blood everywhere, our backs,
So
the
is
whole
the rumor
deal.
false that you were let go because you bladed in that match?
Well, what had happened was when the whole match was done, both of us, me and Dustin, we were exhausted, and they cut out so much of that match, But anyways, I thought it was the best match I ever had. And then I had to drive from Atlanta back to Charlotte, blood all over me, and the whole deal. And Dustin calls me up in the middle of the night, goes, Barry, thank you, and everybody loved the match. The next morning, I'm in Charlotte, and I get the phone call from Eric Bischoff. He says, Barry, what a hell of a match you had. And I said, thanks, Eric, And he says, I got good news and bad news. And I said, well, tell me the bad news. He goes, you're fired. I said, what? Fired? He says, yeah, you're fired. You weren't supposed to get any blood in that match. I said, you got to be kidding me. I said,
How do you have that kind of a match?
I said, I was told that we were supposed to have blood all over our bodies. It was an uncensored truck match in a cage, your match. And you're telling me I'm fired? He goes, yeah. And he says, please, I really want you to leave on good terms. We've been friends, and I promise I'll hire you back. So he says, Dustin's fired and Mike Graham's fired too. So I said, well, are you going to fire the camera crew? Are you going to fire, every single person that's involved? Because they could have shut the cameras off. It wasn't just our fault. He says, Barry, please. I said, Eric, if you don't want me here, I'm done. So that was the end of it. So we got fired because of that.
And just for the last question here, could you briefly go over, you were actually ultimately rehired, and I believe you did several different gimmicks. Do you want to just go over the end of your career there in WCW, your last...
everything's kind of a blank.
I hope you were paid decent at least.
Oh yeah, Eric brought me back, and he gave me a heck of a contract, and it was finally all those guys that were getting paid for doing nothing, that 100,000, 150, 200,000. I was finally one of those guys. It was like, holy cow. I'd go to TV and I'd say, please let me work. How can I work for free? I can't do this. And they'd say, no, just, take the day off. So they'd fly me into TV and I wouldn't even work. It was unbelievable.
That's why they're still operating.
But I got to hand it, Eric Bischoff, great guy. He said exactly, it was terrible I got fired, but he told me he was going to hire me back, and he did, and he gave me a great deal. So,
do you think it's reasons like that ultimately led to their demise?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
There was guys making money so many guys that were making big money that weren't even working. And guys that were making big money that couldn't work.
Because this is a question I guess I have for both of you. A lot of people blame the Time Warner AOL merger, but if WCW had been profitable, do you think they would have actually kept WCW and it wasn't just that they didn't like wrestling?
Yeah.
I think the big mistake that they went through is they went head to head against Vince. If they would have been a regional, mid-Atlantic, Georgia, Florida promotion, they'd still be operating now. And based it on old school drawing versus pay.
It was like Crockett's territory.
Yeah.
We flew in private jets every night, and we'd come home every night.
Yeah.
That's not the wrestling business.
You can't do that.
That's why he didn't make
You
it.
can't bring in $20,000 houses and spend $50,000.
Right. And I just have a few pre-demolition questions for you. I heard that you started working for the Sheik, and I'm just wondering what it was like working for him and what you thought of him as a wrestler.
The original Sheik?
The original Sheik, yeah.
Yeah, I was my original trainer was Guido Mongol, who was a champion there for Vince Sr. And he trained me and broke me in, and then I worked. He was good friends with Eddie Farhide. And I was teaching and coaching in, outside of Columbus, Ohio. So they ran Columbus and they ran Detroit and Toledo and Akron and Canton. So it was easy for me, especially off season, not during football or track in the winter. And he treated me good. I mean, he paid me probably much better than I had earned at that time. I think with the potential that, I was going to stick around and work for him. But there was a big hullabaloo going on with some of the guys that worked with him or under him, and they sort of sabotaged him. And he went to Japan, and all of a sudden, his good buddies are now working a promotion without him. So he had to fly back and sort of salvage his company. But as far as my relationship with him, he was good to me.
Did you ever wrestle him in a one-on-one?
No, I was just starting at the time. I wasn't in the caliber that he would have been in.
And many of your fans don't know that you were extremely popular in Japan and had a whole career in Japan. So I was just wondering if you could sum up briefly like how popular you were in Japan and some of the major people you feuded.
Well, not only Japan, fortunately the United States, and in particular here in Montreal, is a mass superstar. Dino Bravo, Andre, and Gino Brito owned the company at the time. And when I first met those guys was years ago, before I became mass superstar. We all worked for International. I was one of the models. And then I did an angle with Mighty Igor, where I burned his eye in Charlotte, and it drew a lot of money. So then I went to Japan, and Inoki had been in the Mid-Atlantic Territory and saw the reaction of the fans. So when I went to Japan, I did it to him, and it just exploded. I often say that I made literally millions of dollars off of $2.25 cigars. One in Igor's eye and one in Inoki's eye.
What did you think of Inoki as a wrestler?
Oh, great. He was, we did an interview with, podcast with Jim Ross. And he was wondering what the status of Inoki was in Japan. Would he be equal to Hulk Hogan? There's no comparison. Hogan was a franchise here. Inoki was a political and athletic icon. He was the man. The only guy above him would be the Emperor. He had charisma, he had fire.
Good looks.
Yeah, he was legit. He was a shooter. He had the MMA background before the MMA took off. And he was a man of his word. My years in Japan, 12 to 15 weeks a year for 15 to 18 years, was all done by that handshake.
And you brought up Dino Bravo. What did you think of the way that he was, I guess it seemed like he had a hit ordered on him, the way he passed?
It's sad, and I don't know, I often think of him, literally I do think of him.
We talk about him all the time.
Yeah, and especially when we come up here, because he was a good guy, and he was very popular. And the one thing that I can't understand for the life of me is why Vince would take Dino and Martel, who were loved by these fans up here, and turn them heels, and then bring them back here and sort of spit in the fans' face. But I don't know the particulars. I heard it was a hit. I don't know his involvement. It's just sad because I know that he loved his daughter because he often talked about her. And, these guys, they just seem to be dying left and right. Of course, this was a long time ago, but he's dead and Andre's dead. And a lot of my good friends and Barry's good friends, Piper and all these guys are just, boom, they're here one day and gone the next.
One thing about Dino, every time you seen him, he was happy and laughing. He'd always
had a good hearty laugh.
Always, yeah.
And you actually wrestled Bob Backlund when he was champion.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
That was like pulling teeth. Nobody really liked Bob. Bob it was sort of like, now a great athlete, did a so-so interview, but I think he was in a position where he wasn't comfortable. The best thing for Bob should have been a heel 10 years before he became a heel, because people didn't like him when he was a babyface, and they really got behind booing him. They were booing him when he was a babyface, but they really enjoyed booing him when he was a heel. And it was the closest guy that I can think of. I don't know if you remember a guy named Tim Woods,
Yeah,
an
Mr.
amateur wrestler, I think a national champion. And as long as you're talking to him in his ear and you keep him occupied, you could control. But if you didn't say anything for 30 seconds, it was right out of the blue. So.
And do you think that probably they should have just kept the title on Superstar Billy Graham and turned him face, and that may have done better than switching it to Backlund at that time?
Probably would have been a good choice, but I don't know this. I don't know the chemistry with McMahon's and Graham. You can only suspect.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask you. You also had some matches with Hulk Hogan before he took off as a baby face. What was that like? Working?
They were good. You know, Hogan. He was working for the match. At that time, I mean, he was a lot greener than he became. You know, more polished and stuff. But I think he was just searching for his identity too. He had gone from AWA, right?
Yeah.
And come over. A lot of pressure on Hogan.
That was right after the movie.
Yeah, he had to carry it was, this is on you. So he had to look good, and he always looked good. He had good charisma, good fire.
And you also had some matches with Jimmy Snuka. What were those like?
Oh, they were easy. Yeah, Jimmy was. There's a few guys that you can't have bad match. Tommy Rich, Jimmy Snuka, Martel.
Tito.
Yeah, Tito. There's
Kurt Hennig.
Steamboat. All the same type. Lots of fire. Had sympathy from the people. Weren't afraid to sell. You know, knew you weren't going to guzzle them up because you're working for the match.
The baby faces who sold were the ones that were over.
Yeah, Andre,
every one of those guys. Oh my gosh.
If Andre could sell and have sympathy, why can't anybody else?
What do you think of this whole controversy now with Jimmy Snuka that they're trying to bring back?
It's sad. We were just talking about it earlier. I don't know what transpired. I had just come into the territory at that time. Of course, Jimmy that was before Hogan. He was the man. I hope it's not true. I don't know if it's true. But Jimmy's gone through a lot. You know, he fought cancer, and we saw him, about a year ago. He's deteriorated, and this has added to it. And now I heard that last week or so they postponed the prosecution or the investigation because of potential dementia, so they're investigating that. And if he did it, he has to live with it. If he didn't, I feel sorry for him.
And finally, is there any message that you want to tell your fans that are going to watch this interview with you?
Well, like Barry said, and we did an interview earlier today, if it wasn't for the fans, Demolition wouldn't be anything. We always tried to be, and we couldn't all the time, but we always tried to be the best match on the card. Sometimes you can, sometimes, but we gave 150% effort. And we enjoy talking to fans and enjoy their support, and they made us.
Exactly, and Devin, it's like you, when you called and wanted us to come up here, you know, we gave you our word that we were going to come up here, and that's how we've been our whole careers. When we tell somebody we're coming in the territory, that's what we do. You know, I told you earlier, whatever you want, you're the one bringing us in. This is a great territory. You know, you're paying us to come in. We'll do what you want us to do. And we love doing it, and it's because of the fans, and we want, now the younger guys coming up, we want them to have territories like we had. Because back in the day, I mean, you know, you're in Portland, Oregon territory, you're in the AWA, you're in Mid-South, and it's kind of coming to that again, because a lot of the towns we're going to, there's 500 to 1,000 people in them. That's when it's fun for the wrestlers. So we're hoping that all the fans keep coming to wrestling, and it's going to make better wrestling. And we just want to thank all the fans.
Yeah.
Thank promoters like you. We need more of you.